All right, I'm fussing with my dog here this morning. She's getting tangled up in the wires and saying, let's go out and play. And we will get there, Athena, but we're not going to get there soon. So right now, sit, be a good border collie, demonstrate to our viewers and listeners that animals, including humankind, can get along with one another. Hey, check out Elon Musk. I'm thinking Atlas Shrugged on Ryan's classic about a productive human being who decided the rest of us just weren't worth the trouble, and went about the business of creating a world in accordance with reality, while the rest of us sort of suffered. Elon gave an interview, 90 minutes long, to the 2023 DealBook Summit. He was interviewed by a young journalist, and in it, Elon dropped the F bomb repeatedly. And I want to give you all a gift right now. If you're listening, stop for a moment. If you're driving, put your hands at 10 and 2 and concentrate and repeat after me. If you see Kay, tell her I said hello. Say it. If you see Kay, tell her I said hello. Now, what does that mean? If you see Kay, tell her I said hello. Well, you're thinking, if you see Kay, if you see, fuck you. So that's how you can tell somebody, fuck you, without their even noticing. Okay. That's a gift from Law and Legitimacy. No charge on that. We just expect your gratitude and continued loyalty as listeners. Elon was a lot less subtle about it in his interview. You know, we've been, X is apparently under attack by advertisers because Elon engaged in anti Semitism, or so it's claimed. And what he posted was, American Jews and the Jewish community in general has had a tortured relationship with a dialectic that targets whites. And it's no surprise that this.
Here's the original tweet. If we want to reference that, I've got it on the screen.
Sure. Yeah.
The tweet is, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To which Elon responds, you have said the actual truth.
You know, and I think, frankly, he's right.
Oh, look, there's our boy Ron. We're white.
But I think, the point is the dialectic. The point isn't the race. And the point is, and I think this is the point you've been trying to make, Mike.
Yep.
And that is, over time, if you engage in a rhetoric that says we're going to identify with victims everywhere, and every victim has a narrative to tell, and if those victims' narratives start to coalesce around an oppressor, and that oppressor is the master of Western civilization, or is Western civilization itself, or in a systemically racist iteration of Western civilization, the United States, that is domestically ruled by whites, and infused by white supremacists, and we have domestic terrorists, who protest against, the election results in 2020, and all of that racialist paraphernalia. If you create an environment like that, what are you going to do when it turns against you? And so the Palestinians said, yeah, you're right. Colonialism does oppress. You're right. We are oppressed. We're going to strike back. And guess who our oppressors are? Our oppressors are you, Jews, and we're coming after you. And so I think what Elon was saying is, there's a dialectic at work here. That is a set of ideas and consequences that flow from them. And if you begin to play with fire, don't complain if your fingers get burned. And so the world erupted when Elon said this. And advertisers have started to pull their advertising from X, placing the company's health potentially in jeopardy.
Well, and don't forget, Norm, that much of that was because of the report that was released, right, that we covered in an earlier stream. And based on that report, there's been a lawsuit filed, right? It's all of this is in the same environment, talking about the reduction in advertising, or the outright leaving of advertisers.
But play this little couple-minute clip of Elon and Sorkin, his interviewer. This is a model, in my view, of going forward in a world gone mad. Mike and I were talking a couple hours ago this morning, and Mike said, I'm feeling crazy today. And I wrote a note back saying, I'm thinking to myself, does he need meds? Like, how are you feeling crazy, or just out of step with a world gone mad? And I think it was the latter. Look at Elon's response to Sorkin and ask yourself if this isn't an appropriate response to a world gone mad.
Yeah, so what I'll do here is I'll just rewind to basically the beginning. And because this is the context that's sort of missing from this, Elon sits down and immediately has a couple of things to say here.
It's that we've been friends for 16 years, and I promised you I'd be here, and that's why I'm here.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
Any other reason?
But let me ask you this then. Let's just go at it. Just tell me what happened. You write this tweet that says that this is the actual truth. People read that tweet.
Yes.
And they say Elon Musk is an anti-Semite.
Pause right there.
He.
I mean, that is a stupid response to that tweet. It's not anti-Semite. It's noticing tendencies in thought and implications and from the ideas exposed or proposed. So if you engage in stupid chatter and that stupid chatter gets turned on you and somebody calls you on it, that doesn't make you an anti-Semite. It just means you called somebody's bullshit. Let's hear from Elon.
Well, and what I love about this is that Elon literally prefaces the beginning of the conversation by saying, what? I've known you for a long time. That's the only reason I'm here.
Yeah, let's go.
He is riling up this base. You're hearing it from, as I said, the White House. You're hearing it from Jewish groups all over. I think Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL is here. There's lots of people who say this. And by the way, it's not just that.
Did you read the whole thing?
I did, and that's why I want to ask
No
you
responses.
Excuse me?
I said more.
More responses?
Yeah, I said more than what you just read.
Yes. No, there was absolutely more.
Yes.
But I'll tell you the thing that struck me. It wasn't, and I'm an American Jew. It wasn't just the people who had that view. It was actually people who really are anti-Semites, who said, "Oh my goodness, go Elon! This is fabulous." And that actually was the thing that really set me back. I said to myself, "What's going on here?" And I want to know how you felt about that in that moment when you saw all of this
Tell
happening.
us, Elon. Tell us.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I did clarify almost immediately what I meant. I would say that was, if I could go back and say, I should, in retrospect, not have replied to that particular person, and I should have written in greater length as to what I meant.
Write a book, Elon.
I did subsequently clarify in replies, but those clarifications were ignored by the media.
The dialectics
and
of despair.
essentially, I handed a loaded gun to those
Tell
who
us
hate
how
me,
you feel. Come on.
and arguably to those who are anti-Semitic. To
A loaded gun
that,
at you.
I'm
What do you
quite
mean
sorry. That is not that was not my intention. So I did, post on my primary timeline to be absolutely clear that I'm not anti-Semitic.
I believe
and that
I mean, what are you going to do about this loss of
philo-Semitic.
advertising?
And the trip to Israel was planned before any of that happened. It was neither here nor there. Do you see this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what it is?
I do, because I actually
Don't
followed your
report
entire
that
trip to
we're
Israel.
Right.
Here, I'll go ahead and get to some of the more, I guess, we'll share this tab instead. This is the clip that's going around the internet. I wanted to make sure that people knew that there was a 90-minute version, a complete version of that interview available. I think everybody should listen.
I agree. I don't often listen to podcasts and stuff. I shouldn't say that as a podcaster, but there are only so many hours in the day, and I spend most of mine practicing law and being herded by my border collie. But this is well worth listening to. It gave me a whole new appreciation of Elon. But how does Elon feel about those advertisers who are putting SpaceX putting X at risk?
Well, let's ask him.
Part of a apology tour, if you will. That this had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob
I
Iger
hope
today.
they stop.
You hope
Don't advertise.
Wait,
you don't want
what?
them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
How come?
Is somebody going to try to blackmail me with advertising? Blackmail me with money?
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself.
I beg your pardon? What? Are you asking me to have safe sex?
Go fuck yourself.
How do I do that, Elon?
Is that clear?
No, can you make it a
hope
little
it is.
clearer, please?
Hey, Bob.
Hey,
You're
Bob.
in the audience.
That's Bob Iger from
Well, let me
Disneyland.
ask
Hey,
you
Big
then.
Bobby, how you doing, Phil?
Hey, Bob, I'll stop it there.
Yeah, so I mean, I just sort of like that. Elon kind of looked at it, and basically what he goes on to say is, if SpaceX fails if X fails because I told the truth and advertisers pulled their revenue, let the market decide what to do about that. Let Earth decide, as he puts it. Let the people decide. And it strikes me that in that little 5-minute vignette between Elon and his interrogator, there is a model for how to move forward in a broken world, to address the problem that Mike posed earlier. He feels like he's out of his mind. He feels crazy. It's not that we feel crazy. It's just that the world isn't working. This dialectic of despair, anointing everybody a victimhood until the cut's too close to home, in which case, wait, we're not victims. You've raised an inconvenient truth about us. You're being an anti-Semite. You're being this. No, you can't have it both ways. There is a politics of excellence that's rooted in humanity and humankind itself. And this business of playing identities one against another has got to stop. Speaking of things that have to stop, so listen to the thing, Michael posted online. It's a book festival. It's a 90-minute interview. I've listened to about half of it this morning. I'll listen to the other half this afternoon.
It's not necessarily a book festival, just to be clear. This is what they describe this as is business, politics, culture, where it all connects. And that's why I had this on the screen here. You can see the interviewees this year: Kamala Harris, Kevin.
Kamala Harris. Hey, we'd like to ask it. Well, what's it like to be a member of AA and have nothing to do as Vice President of the United States?
This is an interviewee that I'm particularly interested in here babble about stuff that she has no clear idea about. Lena Khan, who's the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. And I've been very critical of her before. But all of these people spoke yesterday. Bob Iger actually spoke yesterday. I haven't listened to anything that he might have said, but Elon was last, so we know that he didn't get a chance to respond.
All right. Well, look, let's move on. What is up with Jack Spratt? I am referring to Special Counsel Jack Smith. Every time I see a photograph of him online, he's doing one of these. And, somebody fed that guy a hot jalapeno, and he swallowed it, and he just can't get the buzz out of his eyes. But, now he's on a tear. Apparently, we learned yesterday that he'd done a warrant, a search warrant of then Twitter, now X, to get the identity of all persons who liked, shared, or otherwise responded to Donald Trump's Twitter feed in the days running up to January 6th. I mean, say what? Last I heard, there were 75 million people that voted for Trump, some significant percentage of them after November 6th and 7th of 2021 were upset, and some percentage of them turned up at the Capitol to protest, and some are still out there raising hell. Jack baby, are we all thought criminals because we don't buy the regime? Is there a database out there right now of people who are not receptive to the truth as you see it? Do we have a special disinformation bureau in the Justice Department prepared to prosecute the worst free speech offenders? Do you have education camps ready to take the likes of Mike and I and readjust our attitudes so that we begin to sing Kumbaya at the appropriate moment? Do you have an Elon Musk cell where he can be reprogrammed to avoid saying things that might offend the woke? Memo to Jack Smith. If you see Kay, tell her I said hello. In other words, fuck you. I mean, who the hell are you to go to the digital public square and find everybody who signed in and create a database of people who listen to somebody who you've decided to prosecute for good reasons or ill, who, according to 75 million American voters, was their choice to be president, who, if the current polls are to be believed, is ahead of the potted plant you report to in the White House, Joe Biden, and might well win the next election in spite of everything that's going on in the country. Jack Spratt can eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. But when it came time to jalapenos, he ate more than he'd ever seen. I mean, Jack, you got to go. And I'm thinking the House, it has the power of the purse. And maybe it's time to have a serious discussion about defunding the Justice Department, or at least defunding those portions of the Justice Department that are riding the hobby horse called January 6th into such an ungainly mess, around the world right now. I was on the phone yesterday with a detainee, a J6 detainee, who had concerns about his safety in the prison because the prison seems to regard him as a white supremacist. And he's constantly being called to the security division for discussions because of conversations, phone calls that they've had. Are those phone calls from Matt Graves' office, Brett, by any chance? Is the District of Columbia's chief prosecutor monitoring those that have been locked up and getting reports from the Bureau of Prisons about who's visiting them, who's contributing money to them, who they're talking to, what they're reading, who they're corresponding with, and are they making a special effort to surveil these guys because they believe they're an ongoing threat to the security of the United States. These guys are worried. And what was particularly worrisome in my discussion yesterday was our discussion of what the reaction was inside a certain federal penitentiary as prisoners watched television in the common room. And there was a report that Derek Chauvin had been stabbed. What was the reaction of prisoners in one federal penitentiary? They cheered. Derek Chauvin, you'll recall, was the former Minneapolis police officer who was convicted in the homicide of George Floyd. None dare call it murder. George Floyd, of course, was overdosed on fentanyl, and there are reports that he had enough in him to kill him, and that may have been actually the cause of death. The medical examiner's report said that there was no sign of a trauma or asphyxiation caused by blunt force. But never mind, a jury convicted. Chauvin's been locked up. And now he's been stabbed, and even his family has been kept from learning the truth about his condition, and they had to hear about the stabbing from third parties. And his fellow inmates cheered. What kind of conditions are we creating in prisons for those we detain? And if we detain them under the cloak of this dangerous fiction of systemic racism and domestic terror and extreme white male extremism, and we start locking these guys up and throwing them into a prison system that cheers the potentially fatal stabbing of a white male inmate, are we not basically saying that when we're locking these people up, they're as good as dead? They're dead men walking. And I know that's not what we're saying, but that's how some people are starting to feel. And I think if you're a House member, especially if you're a member of the House Judiciary Committee and the subcommittee on the Bureau of Prisons, I think you'd want to bring back the Bureau of Prisons commissioner for an interview about the safety of the men being detained. And they're largely men, but women as well, as a result of their involvement on January 6th. An entire political narrative has been created. And Julie Kelly wrote a book, which I'm halfway through reading. It was published in 2022 about J6 and the Justice Department's creation of a war on domestic right, on the domestic right. And Julie is a true believer, and therefore I take most things that she says with a grain of salt. And I was prepared not to like the book as I read it, but as I read it, I began, aside from numerous minor factual errors that would come of her simply being unfamiliar with elaborate court records, I became persuaded that she's onto something. And that there is an effort in the Justice Department to criminalize dissent. And that there is an effort to chill people from coming forward, to chill people in their associations. I know one person who was a supporter of January 6 inmates who's been watching recent political news on Jack Smith's activities and has decided to take a less active role in supporting these men. Score a win for the Justice Department. The guys have been arrested, they're locked up, and now through shenanigans like wholesale sweeping warrants to find out the identity of people who supported Donald Trump or who's on a visitor's list for a guy locked up, investigating people whose crime is compassion, whose crime is caring, whose crime is dissenting. That's going to create a country that's going to be hard to live in.
Well, it's interesting too, because Trump had 90 or 87 point something million followers when I just pulled up his X account. And I'm not sure. I think the New York Sun article that we had up on the screen references that at its peak it was around 90 million strong, or at least 90 million strong when it was then deactivated, or he was suspended and kicked off the platform after January 6th. And so the notion that these one-way interactions, in other words, the unsealed warrant that Jack Smith was granted, sought individual names of accounts that liked tweets. Imagine that Trump's activity is so relevant. The Justice Department isn't necessarily wanting to understand the two-way interaction potentially, but just because Trump's account exists, who was out there liking and sharing his posts?
Well, and here's the thing:
not doing anything.
Normally, I wouldn't be. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been concerned by this. I'd just like, what are they going to do? They're going to be overwhelmed with all that information. But now, with big data, they'll feed it into a program, and this becomes an algorithmic tick. And if we get to the point of social utility scoring and it having an impact on our interaction with the goods and services offered in the marketplace, in other words, whether we can buy them, the price we pay for them, where we can travel, what we can do, this might be one factor in your score. So if you liked Donald Trump in 2020 and you pay 6 cents more a gallon for milk in 2025, it's crazy as it sounds, there could be a causal relationship between the two. This is a chilling example of the surveillance state taking shape. And I don't know what a judge was thinking when he signed that warrant. Of course, I haven't read it, and I should probably withhold broader judgment until I do. But the notion that there was a compelling need for the government to acquire data on who liked Donald Trump strikes me as absurd on its face. Well, a not so fond farewell to Henry Kissinger, who died yesterday at 100. He was living in Washington, Connecticut, and maybe Washington Depot, Connecticut, in what's called the Northwest Corner. It's a lot of old New York money and estates and so forth. And Henry was an architect of American foreign policy for a good many years and an exemplar of what is called the realist trend in foreign policy. Students of foreign policy will realize that there are those who are idealists and those who are realists. Idealists say, we're going to support our ally because it's the right thing to do, and we need to do the right thing. A realist says, can we really afford our principles and what's in our interest? Yes, we have an interest, obviously, in supporting the right side, but we also have limits, and we need to make pragmatic adjustments to what we can and cannot do. And we need to recognize the world for what it is. And sometimes, even though the devil is on the other side of the ocean, we need to deal with him because the ocean isn't going to disappear, and neither is the devil. So he helped open China up and helped broker Nixon's rapprochement with China. But one chilling comment that he made, I read about this in a history of the nation of Israel that I just finished the other day, trying to understand what's going on there. Is he once advised Nixon, and Kissinger was Jewish, by the way. He once advised Nixon, well, even if the Soviets begin to round up, he didn't have problems with English as I do. Even if the Soviets begin to round up the Jews and put them in concentration camps, it's not in our interest to react. So there are limits to how far realism can go. And there is a tension between realism and idealism. But I was struck by his death at this fraught time as I watch events unfold in Palestine and in the Middle East, because we're left with this uncomfortable conflict that has no easy answer between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And it's resonating throughout the world. Here in Vermont, 3 young Palestinian men were shot outside Burlington. 2 of them were reportedly wearing keffiyehs. A 48-year-old man, has been arrested. The federal government is accusing him of hate crimes. There's a little bit of chatter on the dirt roads around the state that it's unfortunate these young men were shot. Their families sent them here to the United States to get an education because it was presumably safer. But when they came to this country to enjoy our safety, they certainly acquired the right to their points of view and to freedom of expression, but they don't need to politicize us and they don't need to bring their conflict here. And so I can't say there's sympathy for the shooter, but there's a sense that the world is raw and the tensions that inform it are real and not going away anytime soon. Henry Kissinger, the Dean of American Foreign Policy Realists, is now on the other side of mortality. If you're listening, Henry, good luck. Make way for the rest of us. We'll be joining you sooner than we care to. Hey, Mike, have you ever gone to a professional baseball game?
Yeah, of course.
Why?
Because it's an American pastime.
And when you go, do you root for a particular team?
The team whose stadium I'm going to is going to probably be who I root for.
And you follow the players, right?
Of course.
And if a star pitcher is pitching, you want to see how he does, right?
Obviously.
If there's a guy who's batting at 350, you want to see what his magic is, correct?
100%.
How many times have you gone and said, but I'm not going to go unless I know who the umpires are?
Never.
How many times have you even learned the umpire's name?
Never.
I mean, and that's because when you go to a sporting event, you're not going to watch the umpires. When they take over the game, there's something wrong with it. In replays,
umpires are just verbal crash test dummies, right? For the fans.
They are, except, in our desire to quote unquote get it right in football, we now have endless replays, and it becomes a drag. At some point, you want to just say, "Hey, let the guys play the game." Well, there are umpires in courtrooms too, and they're called judges. And a sure sign that a judicial system or a particular case is not handling reality well is when the umpires start to take control. I call it the revolt of the umpires. And there's a particularly glaring example of this revolt taking place in New Haven, Connecticut right now. Spoiler alert, this is a client of mine and a good friend. Richard P. Silverstein was suspended this week from the practice of law. Those of you who are from New England may know of Rick. He's a salty mid-60s something guy who wanders around. He's recovering from a stroke, and he's always had this dry, laconic way. So, hey, Rick, how are you? I'm fine. Why the fuck are you asking? Now, Rick is loved by his hundreds of clients throughout southern New England. He's represented multi-generations of families. Hey, I represented your grandfather. I got him out. I represented your dad. I got you out. I'll represent you too. I know he sounds a little gravelly and like Alex Jones, but he does. So Rick, has been at war with judges in New Haven for a while now. And a judge can mess with a lawyer by referring him for discipline. And so at one point, Rick was referred for discipline because he was believed to have too many cases and he couldn't manage his files. And this was showing a disrespect to judicial resources. I was retained to represent Rick, and I wrote a tart response. I don't want to hear from a judge about disrespect for judicial resources. How many hours have I wasted for judges to come out on the bench? How many times have I come to court for a 9 o'clock calendar call, expecting to make it in one city, and so that I could go to an 11 o'clock calendar call in another town? And the 9 o'clock guys got me there at 11:15 with no apologies. I said, the judiciary shows no respect to the defense bar, and we've got clients waiting months, sometimes years for trial, especially in the post-COVID world. If a lawyer's clients aren't complaining, back off, judge. And, so we had our hearing. We don't have a result yet, but we were very forceful in our response. Well, the umpire struck back. A client complained that Rick wasn't in communication with him. Rick got the case dismissed. But the client had filed a grievance, a complaint against Rick, and it was placed before a judge who's part of the group that controls the New Haven courthouse. Chief disciplinary, I didn't represent Rick in this. I didn't even know about the case until this week. But the chief disciplinary counsel, the top lawyer cop in the state, appeared in the case and said, Rick missed the deadline for responding to this, but the case was dismissed and the client wants to withdraw the grievance. Rick's a great lawyer. Why, Judge, the last 5 or 6 jury trials he tried in this town against impossible odds, he won. He's keeping the system honest. He's representing his clients vigorously. And yeah, it's a tough job. And he's getting older, and it's hard to keep up with the infinite demands of people, especially in a social media world where when a client sends you a text message at 5 a.m., they're pissed off if you haven't responded by 5:30. But give him a reprimand, slap him on the wrist. Well, a judge who I will not name, at least not yet, suspended Rick from the practice of law for 1 year. I'll be taking Rick's appeal, and we'll be filing paperwork in the appellate court on Monday, assuming I can get out of this snowbound paradise I'm in here in Vermont. But it's an outrage in my view. And, if you have the inclination, look Rick Silverstein up, Richard P. Silverstein. He's on 50 Elm Street in New Haven, Connecticut. Send him a card or a note. He is one of the good guys at the law. He is not warm and fuzzy. He'll give you a hug, but you'll be wanting to get away from that hug real quick because you're afraid that when you're in his embrace, he might gnaw on your ear and bite it off and spit it out and say, "What the hell's the matter with your ear? It doesn't taste good." But he is the kind of guy who, in a pinch, hundreds, if not thousands of people in southern Connecticut have gone to when they're charged with a crime, even if they've committed it or whether they haven't, but they want somebody to fight for them and they want someone to get their life back. And he's given hundreds of men their lives back. Why, he's even put people through college that he's gotten acquittals for, and that he's come to believe had a raw deal in life. His office is a sanctuary for the dispossessed and the despised. And now the judicial branch, an umpire in a robe, has decided, well, the client's happy, that's fine, but we're not. And I suspect that the underlying game there is they want to get a trustee in Rick's office to see what's really going on. Because even if the suspension holds, he'll be out of the law for a year, but his clients will continue to have cases pending, and a trustee will be appointed to serve their interests. But whose interest will really be served? Nobody wants Rick Silverstein out of the law other than a judge or two. His clients are happy. Hundreds of people are pounding down his door to ask him to fight for him. And when he fights, he wins. So Rick, we're rooting for you. I don't know how many people who listen to this podcast are from Connecticut. I get approached every now and then in a courthouse. Somebody will thank me for doing it. If you're from Connecticut, give Richard P. Silverstein a call, show him some support, show him some love, and ask the umpire in the courtroom you're before, do you think anybody really came here to see you rule? Or do you think they came here to see that justice gets done? And they came here because they care about one side of the aisle or not, or another. Nobody cares about the referees, Judge. You're supposed to call the game, put your robe on, and go home. That's why you get paid the intermediate bucks and get to go home at 5 o'clock and not worry all night long about the demands of a profession you can no longer handle. And that's why you took a robe. I digress.
Well done, Norm. Well done. It's kind of quiet in the chat this morning, but we've been getting more and more stream viewers. Lawyer Will ask you a question. Norm, have you represented many other lawyers being subjected to discipline? I think the answer is yes here, correct?
Yeah, no, I do some of that work. Yes, I have. And, the disciplinary regime in Connecticut is different. It's changed recently. It used to be the top lawyer cop was a fellow named Mark Dubois, and Mark took seriously the law's commitment that says that disciplining of lawyers isn't intended to be punitive in character. It's to protect the public. It's to assure that a lawyer honors and respects his professional obligations. And when there's a complaint, there should be an inquiry about whether the lawyer is capable of doing the job, whether he needs re-education or correction. But removing a lawyer from the practice of law is extraordinary. There's a new regime in place. And in a new administration, the grievance process is under the thumb of the judicial branch. In fact, in Connecticut, they've now created a new judge to handle disciplinary matters, none other than Barbara Bellis, who was the judge presiding as umpire in chief in the Alex Jones case. And so cold days are ahead for Connecticut lawyers.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
And was it because you had to deal with a brief temporary suspension of your license as well at her hands? No?
I still have to. Yeah. I mean, I gave information pertaining to the plaintiffs to co-counsel in a case we were working on together. His office mistakenly leaked it to an adversary in one of Alex Jones's case in Texas. And my judge read about that in the newspaper and declared a show cause hearing where I had to come in and give account of myself. In front of a packed courtroom. I asserted the Fifth Amendment for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to discuss here. And she suspended me for 6 months from the practice of law.
And I only intended to connect it. That was also Judge Barbara Bellis.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. So just to connect the two, Judge Barbara Bellis is now overseeing legal disciplinary proceedings in the state of Connecticut, and she's also the one that used the information that you just disclosed to suspend your...
Yeah, which suggests I don't have a long shelf life in the law in Connecticut. My case is under appeal. It'll be argued in the appellate courts in January. If I win, I'm back. If I don't, I'll have a 6-month vacation. We'll
get you barred here in North Carolina.
Oh, no, there'll be parallel discipline. Look, I stand by my conduct in the Jones case. I fought the good fight. I did what I could. I think the judge was dead wrong. I'll let my lawyer do my talking for me. If the umpires win in this case, obviously I'll be upset. I won't say I'll be heartbroken. I will say I'll be further radicalized. When the umpires take control of the game, it's not much of a game. You don't go to the ballpark to say who's calling balls and strikes. You go to see the game played. When litigants go to court, they don't come expecting a judge to put his or her thumb on the scales, especially in a jury case. They want a jury to decide the case. But, we've got authoritarian leanings in the United States, and they're not coming from the left. They're coming from the institutions that control us and the institutions that are in power. And there is no institution with quite as much unreviewable power as a judiciary.
I'll leave us on this comment here. If you care to respond to Janet, beautiful Connecticut has the most communists in the country. Not addressing the truth about that will sink all the silent lawyers.
Well, it's a blue state for a reason. We have blue blood, and there's a lot of money in the state. And, there's really no meaningful Republican Party, you want to talk about a uniparty, go to Connecticut. It's depressing.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to end on that depressing note. I'm just kidding. I'm feeling great. Just to remind everybody about the 2023 RealBook Summit. I call it RealBook because Elon actually legitimized the entire thing with his 90-minute sit down. Do go watch that whole thing. I've got just a few more minutes to finish, but I think Norm, I want to maybe expand topically on what he discussed tomorrow, just maybe for the first 10-minute segment, because there's a lot there. I put it here, anti-Semitism, but he also talks about advertising. He talks about the notions of truth, purpose, and individual meaning, hope, and a collective vision for the future.
When I watched the interview, I kept thinking of Atlas Shrugged. I kept thinking, here is a truly creative man who would say he's got demons, and sometimes they torture him. Sometimes some days are better than others. Life is hard, as he says in the interview. I'm not sure anybody else would really want to be me. But what he's done is decided to address reality at the most basic terms he can, in terms of the laws of physics. He says you can't break those laws with impunity, and there is a larger reality out there, and he means to serve it and make the world better for all of us, independent of what we think about it. That's liberty. That's an example, and that's something worth following.
1,000%. And in the spirit of that, make sure you're following us on Elon's sacred platform, X, at LawPod Daily. We broadcast to that platform live. Hello to everybody who's joining us from X. Elon, if you happen to see this, thank you. And Norm, we will talk more about this tomorrow morning.
We will. Talk to you then, everyone. Be well.
See you later, everybody.